Hey guys, welcome to Kit Talk. It's part review, part modeling explanation, but mostly it's just rambling. So for the first Talking Kit episode, I'm actually going to start with an odd choice. This is the Master Grade Delta Plus mobile suit, and when I say odd, it's because whenever someone has a top worst kits thread on Reddit, inevitably, this is the kit that I always say it's the worst kit I've ever built. And then I have to end that statement with the caveat, oh, and I built 3 of them. So, take that for what it's worth. This is going to be my final iteration of this build. And I'm going to switch the camera to an overhead view now, and we'll look at the kit in some detail. Okay, we're looking at the kit from an overhead view now, and I'm going to lay the kit down. Obviously the wing binders I'm going to remove, if I can, just to do that a little more safely. And I'm just going to start to talk about the kit from the head down to the feet, and give you an idea of what went into this build. So first things first, the reason why I'm such a both lover and hater of this kit is the fact that the entire design sacrifices everything so this can transform into a Wave Rider mode, which looks okay, but it gives up so much else that it's not really a fair trade in my opinion. But let's start talking about the kit first. So for the head, there's actually very little that I actually did to the head. The primary thing is on the sides of the head, I had these little indents up here, as well as rescribed some panel lines in the face just so they would hold the panel lining fluid a little bit better. For the eyes, normally this is just a visor piece, and the indent for the eye is actually on the back side, which you can fill in, with red paint or whatever. What I actually did is I carved out little eye pieces and glued them on here and then painted them red in the more traditional raised eye style of most Gundam kits. I thought it looked better overall. On the chest, there are this little raised surface here, so I scribed that a little bit so it would hold the ink a little bit better, as well as the cockpit hatch here. I used a digital caliper and traced basically the outline of the piece onto here and then scribed it in, so that way there's a little more surface detail, otherwise it's completely bland. The cockpit is fully painted. One moment. Don't do this at home with your painted kits, you could damage them. So there is a little painted Rudy Marcinus in there. Further down on the arms here, on the wrists, I scribed this detail in using 2 different sizes of BMC chisel on both sides. In the little recessed areas of the arm, here, I added these little minus molds or vernier details. They're from Kotobukiya. And then, let's see, the next thing I did is down on the waist. I added this vent piece here on the cod piece and painted it white and gray so it would work with some of the other white details on the kit, as well as there are these small little vent details up here hidden in the side skirt armor. Normally it's completely blank in there, kind of lame. The legs kind of followed a similar theme to the cockpit hatch. I scribed this line here, kind of following the basic shape of the angle up here, and then used a different size chisel to add a little more detail. And then down here on the ankle, call it what you will, I added these little cap things. Normally this piston assembly, it just has kind of not necessarily a blank, but you can see where the piston connects to the inside of the ankle, and I didn't really care for the way that looked. The last thing I did down here is I used a drill bit, a pin vise and a drill bit to mark these little holes in the base of the feet, just for a little added detail. Okay, so I'm going to talk about the wings next. This was the most painstaking and stressful part of the entire build, because all of the panel line scribing you see on the large lower wings here, I did by hand, and I had to duplicate it after the first one an additional 3 times. And as you can see here, they're actually fairly close. And most of this was just done, with a combination of the digital calipers and eyeballing everything to make sure it was roughly in the same spots and followed the same lines. There are a few minor errors here in between each individual pattern, but generally when these are, on opposite sides, there's really no easy way to see, like, okay, that's a little bit shorter than this one, or some of the panel lines are a little bit thicker or thinner than on the other side. But generally, they're pretty close, and I'm actually very happy with the way this came out. I don't do a lot of panel line scribing, so when I do it, I want to make sure that it looks good. And the main reason I did it on this kit is because these wings are entirely blank otherwise, and they're an eyesore. The panel line scribing theme I did on the wings is actually based off of a similar pattern on the, maybe it was a high grade, maybe it was a no grade, the Flag Over Custom, the 1/100 scale. And it really worked well on this particular shaped wing. I also did a much more basic pattern on the little winglets up here, where it just kind of follows the outside outline of the wing, so not as interesting. And then obviously kind of followed the basic stock detail or decal scheme for this kit with the Romeo 008 decals in the EF-SF, and these are all off of the DX06 Unicorn decal set. I also included a Anaheim Electronics. This is the one it's basically off the St. Andrew Stein, but it really worked here, and it mirrored the Nail Argama decal on the other side quite nicely. On the flip side of these, I've gotten in the habit of always painting little indents like these, like a frame color, just for more added detail. And then this kind of flap area, I don't really know what it would be. I also repainted it as like kind of a frame detail color. Let's see. We also have the beam rifle, and this is the same exact type of beam rifle that the Riesel has. As you can see, it's kind of scraped up already. The kit actually has a fairly tough time holding this kit just due to the length of the stock here. This is always like kind of interfering with the elbow, so when you hold it out, like the arm has to be completely straight. If you have it at an angle, like this entire thing just interferes with the way the joint moves. You can also like tuck this under the arm, like he's kind of getting ready to shoulder it, but it kind of irritates me when Bandai includes weapons like these that don't really work well with the kit. I don't think it's necessarily a problem with this particular part. It was just a poor choice to include in the box. If they gave us a modified version of this with a shorter stock or something that worked well with the kit, that would have been greatly preferred. And then I did this in a multi-tone scheme, so we have more indents that are painted like a frame color, and then different elements of the barrel and whatever part this would be, handle assembly, are more of a frame color. I do in general really like the way this rifle looks. It's just a shame it doesn't work all that well with the kit. And obviously it was probably intended to work well with the Riesel. However, I haven't built one of those. We also have the shield here, or the nose cone to the Wave Rider mode. Not too much going on here. One of the big downsides of this shield is the upper and lower parts of the shield are two separate parts. And having built this kit before, I've noticed that it has a tough time staying together back here on these fins because there aren't really any pins back here, I think past like around this area. So what I actually did is I painted the little frame components in here. Same with the recessed. There's like an underframe piece here that holds in the missiles and the beam saber and the nose cone. I painted all that stuff gray and then sandwiched that between the two pieces of the nose cone, and then did the seamline fusion using glue along the length of the nose on both sides, and then sanded it so that it was, you know, flush and nice looking. If this kit, I'm never going to transform this thing into the Wave Rider. I did that with one of the previous models, and it scraped the hell out of the paint, and it's just not worth repeating. But if I did, I would hope that this would, you know, be tight enough that it wouldn't open back up. However, yeah, again, I'm not really willing to try that. Fun fact, or whatever, bit of a review comment. Every version of the kit I've had of this, this little peg thing always pops out when I go to remove the shield from the forearm. I don't know why that is, just poor design, but that's something you have to watch out for. Okay, so I've talked about what I've done to this model kit. Now I'd like to talk about how this kit is in terms of build and what my problems are with the design. I've already mentioned that this design sacrifices a lot so that it can do a fairly accurate transformation between the mobile suit and the Wave Rider mode. And while that's commendable in many ways, it also sacrifices really basic functionality like the ability to stand up. Of the 3 Delta Pluses I've built, this is the only one that I've managed to get to, you know, to have it stand on its own without just tipping forward, because that's generally what they do. The joints here in the feet for these really long feet is really weak, and it's held in both by the upper ankle armor here as well as this other lower piece of ankle armor. And if I push this up, you're going to see this gray piece here kind of has like a cross-shaped design to it, and that fits into the lower ankle armor. The only downside is this lower ankle armor tends to slip out all the time. Both of my other previous models used to just nosedive off of my shelf fairly regularly, to the point where I didn't display either of them without an action base at all times, just because I was concerned that I would break something. In fact, I remember distinctly breaking things on the first one. Another problem with this model kit has to do with the knee assembly. The kneecaps themselves are independent in terms of their motion. They connect some working parts of this piston here into the knee joint, and if the kneecap comes too far up, then this all unlocks, and it moves in a really strange and irritating pattern that makes posing kind of a pain in the butt, and generally it doesn't necessarily look all that good, and the range of motion isn't great. Similarly, the leg joints up here are all kind of, they're pinned together onto the torso, and they can flop out like that, so that the legs can flip around and do their Wave Rider thing. And the only thing that's really holding them in are the skirt armor in, I believe, the front and back. On a lot of these kits, especially the prior to I built, that's like a really weak joint. So most of what I did on this kit is I believe I glued those together so that way they can't flop out. But that's definitely another weakness of the design. Finally, another thing to watch out for here is just that the chest is mostly hollow, again, to do with the transformation. These chest armor pieces can kind of get lopsided sometimes because there's nothing really securing them into the final position that they're in. So, I mean, all in, this kit just seems to have a lot of stability issues, thanks entirely to the transformation of the design. It's not necessarily a bad looking kit. In fact, I actually really like the design of this mobile suit. Up until the Hyakushiki 2.0 or Revive or whatever they're calling the Master Grade version, I was actually considering doing a conversion of this model to a Hyakushiki just because of their similarities and how aesthetically nice the design is. If you this is the type of kit that if someone were to ask me to recommend this, like, you'd really have to be a fan of the design and be able to put up with all the other crap that's going on here for me to be able to recommend it. So if you're looking at this kit casually as someone who's like, oh, you know, okay, the design was cool, I'm not in love with it, I'd say skip it. If you're really a fan of how it looks and you're willing to put in the time, then I would recommend buying it, but otherwise, hey, avoid it. I know there's a high-grade version of this model kit. I don't know if it's any better, but generally the high grades tend to be more robust because they rely on parts forming rather than mechanical transformations using inner frames in the model kits. So that's my recommendation in any case. For those of you that have built this model kit, what did you think of it? I bought this thing not long after it was originally released, and I remember reading all of the reviews, like on Gaijin Gunpla. They're basically, all of them said, yeah, unanimously, it's crap. Don't buy it, don't touch it with a 10-foot pole, and I got it anyways, and I hated the first one, and I did some stuff to it, and I wasn't happy with it, and I sold it, and I did it again, and it was closer, but I still didn't like it. And then I decided to give it a third shot, and third time's the charm because I'm not touching it again. But I am happy with the final result of this. So let me know your thoughts on the Master Grade Delta Plus. Leave your comments below. If you haven't already, you can subscribe to me on YouTube. You can follow me on Twitter. And check out my blog because there's a lot of cool kits on there. And if you haven't seen it already, you might find something you like. Alright guys, thanks for checking the video out. See ya.